All right, here we go.
Okay.
And Charles Moscowitz here. Welcome to the program, Monday through Friday, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, live at YouTube and subscribing platforms. Dr. Gerard Lameiro is my guest. More great news for America. He's also the author of Real World Socialism. I've had him on before. Great interview, a great book. Gerard, thank you so much for joining me.
Great to be with you.
So, Gerard, we have to talk about what is happening right now in this country. There's nothing more important, and that is what I would contend is the equivalent of a fascist coup d'état. I say that, I know that sounds like I'm being hyperbolic, but what a fascist coup d'état does in countries that they take over is they basically storm the radio station, they grab the means of communication, and then they start putting out propaganda that instructs the people to be calm because they're now in control and they now have the power. And meanwhile, their various minions and thugs on the street and on the inside gradually consolidate power by taking control of all of the big institutions. And that is exactly what's happening here. There has been not a single vote yet, not a single certification in any state. There are many states that are still very highly contested. And yet, three media outlets, the three big ones, goose stepped out and declared Biden the winner, thus creating a certain psychological advantage. And now they are proceeding to push this lie, this propaganda, and act as if it's a fait accompli. And the idea being that the public is going to get used to it, and that President Trump, if he responds to it, then there's something mentally wrong with him. He's being denounced, and basically in a very communistic way, and that his listeners had better shut up because apparently they're building an enemies list, and they're talking. Some of the radicals are talking about, truth and reconciliation commissions to find out who did support President Trump. So that's my synopsis on what's going on. Gerard, what say you?
I think that's pretty accurate. It is a type of coup if you try to take an election illegitimately, illegally. I think, well, first of all, my forecasting, I think, was exactly right. States like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, I predicted would go to Trump. I think he was ahead, but then they stopped all vote counting. And then suddenly ballots started appearing. We have evidence of a lot of strange things. For example, one poll worker in Detroit said most people had gone home by 4 a.m. She was there at 4 a.m. She said 3 cars pulled up with 61 ballots, 61 boxes of ballots. And she said, surprisingly, every one of them was for Joe Biden, not one ballot for Trump. And of course, that changed the numbers in Michigan. Believe it or not, we have another story of somebody in Wisconsin saying that I think it was 69,000, 62,000, whatever, large number of ballots showed up there also at 4 a.m. in the morning. And they're just, stories go on and on. It appears to me that there were massive voter fraud. And I think that the Trump campaign, his legal team is gathering information. They have a lot of affidavits that are signed. People would be under threat of perjury if they're lying. And we have postal employees that say that their postmaster told them to backdate ballots so that they could be valid. We have all sorts of information. It sounds like funny things were happening in multiple states. It looks like this election was an attempt to take away the presidency from Trump. He should have won. It was obvious in the campaigning. He was well loved, gaining these huge crowds, and Joe Biden couldn't get more than about 10 or 20 people at a crowd. Nobody cared much about him in his campaigning, and yet he comes out with 75 million votes. I think most people just don't buy the results of this election. And speaking of which, just recently, I think yesterday, Real Clear Politics decided to uncall the state of Pennsylvania for
Oh, I
Biden.
know it. That's huge.
It's
And
huge because it says he's not president-elect by their state.
exactly. Now we have the equivalent of two popes, right? I mean,
Right.
so yeah, I mean, I watched it the night of Election Day, and around 11, 12 o'clock, everything came to a stop. Of
You
all
all got
people,
to go to bed.
yeah, and actually, see, MSNBC, Rachel Maddow was more honest than Fox News, which was horrible. We now know they were completely in the tank for Biden, and they were deliberately trying to undermine the president by not calling states like Florida and Ohio, where
Part of his
obviously Trump
way.
had
Yeah.
won. Oh yeah, by 7 points, and then calling Arizona, even though there was still millions of votes out, and there was no evidence there that Biden was ahead at any time. It was sort of like what Dan Rather did in 2000, during the 2000 election, when he called Florida before the polls closed on the Panhandle for Gore. This is the worst kind of voter interference and manipulation and election interference imaginable. So then these states all closed down mysteriously, where you have Trump ahead by over 500,000 votes in Pennsylvania, about 300,000 in Michigan, about 200,000 in Wisconsin, and about 100,000 in Georgia and North Carolina. They all shut down. And then at four, as you say, the wee hours of the morning, they suddenly open up again with Biden having an edge.
You
And
know what?
the thing stinks from to high heaven.
It does. And I want to tell you what I got a kick out. It was Maria Bartiromo of Fox Business.
Yeah.
She said that in the middle of the night, the voter fairy visited them.
Exactly. Yeah. That's perfect metaphor. Exactly. Not only were they all Biden votes, and they didn't even they didn't even try to pretend. You'd think that they might use a little sophistication by throwing in a few Trump votes, but they were 100% Biden votes. And there are cases, I think, in Pennsylvania, where something like 30,000 votes came in with only Biden knocked scratched off, no other candidate. Suddenly that appears, and then you have this glitch, so called, with this Dominion computer software that's being used by a county in Michigan, that being Antrim County, where you had this man running as a Republican for a more local office, who it was tipped off because he only got 2 votes. And he knew he had more than 2 votes. He had 6 members of his family vote for him. So that was such an obvious problem that caused an investigation and a recount in that county. And sure enough, they found that 6,000 votes that were cast for Biden actually were for Trump, and they reversed it. And apparently this local candidate, I think, won. But the point is that, they claimed that this was some kind of a computer glitch. I don't care if it was a glitch or if it was on purpose, but the fact is it happened. 6,000 people were disenfranchised. Now, apparently, they say that over 40 counties in Michigan are using this same software. They've now found a second county where they think that the same glitch happened. There's a county in Wisconsin that the same glitch happened. And now Pennsylvania has a big one with about 10,000 votes where this happened. And apparently this company, which I think that it's one of the main shareholders of which is Dianne Feinstein's husband, it's been introduced in about 20 states. It's been suspected in the past as having thrown an election against Bernie Sanders. So they do it to their own people too, assumedly. And that this is causing an investigation. This should be a national investigation. Every county that uses this software should be doing a hand recount. Now, you mentioned the postal testimony. The Postmaster General is now investigating that. The FBI is investigating it. And now, finally, Attorney General Bill Barr has stepped forward and has authorized district attorneys across the country to investigate legitimate claims of voter fraud, because you've got unprecedented numbers of people who passed away who had their votes cast, which is a terrible thing. Can you imagine if you have, your parent passed away 3 or 4 years ago who was a staunch Republican, and all of a sudden you find out that somebody voted in their name for Biden? I mean, this is like, it's real. This is real dirty. I mean, people voting who are not residents in Nevada. Nevada apparently is a hotbed for that. You've got the Sharpies in Arizona. I mean, there's
Right.
all these things that are now being investigated. To my way of thinking, this looks like, at least from the cursory information we have, a systemic and coordinated conspiracy to steal the election. I mean,
Right.
I don't know how else to describe it.
Right. And I recall 3 weeks ago, I was listening to Joe Biden speak, and he came out and said, and I'll try to quote as close as I can. He said, I have the when did he use the word, most outstanding?
Yes, the best. He said that Barack Obama and I set up, and he said it. Maybe it might have been a moment of dementia. That doesn't matter. The fact is that he tipped his hand and he said we have the best voter fraud machine in the history of American politics.
Yeah.
This is out there. This is making the rounds. He did state this.
Yeah, and I heard it
in an interview.
Heard
oh
it.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you have it. I mean, it's a simple statement of truth. I mean, this isn't new. I mean, during the Obama election against Mitt Romney, there were counties and precincts in Detroit and Philadelphia, the same cities, that voted like 99% for Obama. In some cases, 105% for Obama.
Right.
But the difference back then is that Mitt Romney didn't have any spine. He wasn't going to do anything. He was an inside, like an institutional player. Whereas Trump doesn't F around. Let's be honest. They're not going to pull Trump. They're not going to. Trump is hardened to this kind of battle. He's been dealing with it for 4 years. He's not just going to roll over. And doesn't matter what kind of crap they throw at him now. Oh, he's despondent. He's depressed. He's this. He's that. Melania is about to leave him. He's not going to. He's just going to keep forging forward. And I think that at the end of the day, we're going to see a victory, not only in the Electoral College, but also in the popular vote. I think Trump won a landslide.
I do think he's going to win. The key dates are December 8th, when all the Electoral College members have to be certified if they're going to vote. And then December 14th, the actual day the Electoral College meets. And those are key dates. And I think they're going to be litigation up until then. But here's the good news. Let's say some of the litigation gets so drawn out that there are not any certain states like Michigan and Wisconsin don't have a certified delegation. If that happens and no one gets 270 electoral votes, Trump wins because it goes to the House. And in the House, the rule is one state, one vote. So all those Democrats in California, those Democrat congressmen, they're all only get one vote. They don't vote by individual, because the Democrats would win if it was, a case of a majority vote, but it's not. It's one state, one vote, and more delegations are controlled by Republicans than Democrats. So it'll be a Trump victory.
Yep. So there we have it. I mean, it just seems like it's getting more closer every day. I mean, I think that also in the House, there are several elections where they haven't called them yet. It's just like what they're doing to Trump. Like North Carolina is not going to call their election for another couple of weeks. They got a corrupt Democratic governor. Alaska apparently isn't calling theirs either, but Trump is way ahead in those states.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's ridiculous. And in Georgia, of course, there's, you have some corrupt, counties where apparently Zuckerberg poured millions of dollars into trying to defeat Trump. And you've got Soros pouring money into electing local district attorneys and other shenanigans.
Yeah.
And, but yet even there, I mean, I think the governor has now said that he's going to, and he's a Republican, that he's going to ferret out the corrupt votes. And you have this ridiculous attorney general in Georgia, a Republican, who has said, well, we know there's some corruption and voter fraud, but we don't think it's enough to make any difference, even though the margin is now down to around 10,000 votes for Biden. in a
I
state
think
where there were 3 million votes cast. I mean, that's like, and he doesn't think that it's going to make a difference based on what? He should resign. He's a disgrace.
yes. I think there's enough difference because Trump was way ahead when the extra votes started pouring in. At least it looks that way. And so I think it's going to make a big difference. I think Georgia ultimately will be for Trump. Pennsylvania will go for Trump because I think what's going to happen there is they're going to throw out a block of 300,000 invalid ballots in Philadelphia, another 180,000 in Pittsburgh. And all of that is going to restore the balance to where Trump will be ahead by plus 350,000 or so. In my original forecast, I said that Trump would win by 250,000 votes in PA. And I think he ultimately win by more than that. And I think it'll be decided probably in the Supreme Court because I think Pennsylvania is pretty corrupt.
Oh, I know. And he was ahead by 500,000 votes in Pennsylvania when they stopped counting. And then they suddenly started counting and then recounting and then recounting. I mean, even just that whole thing is like, it's inexplicable. I mean, Boston, Massachusetts, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, these are much bigger cities. And they had the count perfectly finished, both the same day and the early vote within hours of the closing of the polls. I mean, there's no excuse for this. This is very strange. I mean, there's so many things that look really, really rotten with this election. But Gerard, you say that you think it's going to go to the Supreme Court. I think my understanding is that the issue there is that the Constitution says in black and white that the state legislature shall decide how the regulation with regard to election day and whether or not there will be any votes counted afterwards. And the state legislature in Pennsylvania voted that it would be election day. It's a Republican state legislature. But the liberal Democratic governor overturned this, went to the state Supreme Court, which is also elected and which is made up of Democrats, and they upheld that in a manner that is completely unconstitutional. So I think that if that goes to the Constitution, and now you have Justice Alito stepping in and saying that any vote that arrived after Election Day has to be separated until there's a further decision. So I think that's what we're talking about with this 300,000 votes. And I think that it will go to the Supreme Court. And I think that the Supreme Court is going to uphold the law probably unanimously. I don't think it's going to be partisan. I think it's
the Constitution.
Exactly. This is black and white. This is like, something that's not up for interpretation. I mean, it's very clear that the legislature has that prerogative. So I think that's going to do it. And I think at that point, Pennsylvania, where Pennsylvania goes, the country goes.
Absolutely.
And it's already moving in that direction. I feel a sense of excitement now. I mean, I feel less despondent than I did. And I think that the media is just like totally blackballing this whole story. I mean, it's almost like it doesn't exist. This morning I was listening to Stephanopoulos, and then this is like, look, there's nothing going on here. President-elect Biden, they would call him, which is not accurate. And he's figuring out what to do with cabinet members. And that Attorney General Barr is acting irrationally by calling for voter fraud to be looked into. And they're saying that's just politics and he's interfering in the election and this kind of garbage. And it's like they know what's going on. I mean, this is like Soviet style propaganda.
It's ridiculous. And by the way, the big tech media or social media, those are all in the tank for them too, for Biden. If you're a conservative, I know a lot of people who are conservatives who have been blackballed and all their stuff is censored. They mention something about voter fraud and then all of a sudden they're censored. They lose their account or they can't.
You can't even use the word voter fraud. Like I won't put that word in the headline of this show today because I'm afraid I could lose my YouTube.
Yeah.
You cannot discuss voter fraud right now because this is the worst case of censorship in American history. This is terrible. This is absolutely fascist. I mean, this is what, as I say, the fascists do. They seize the means of communication. And that's what's going on here. They can't hide under the fig leaf that they're privately owned. They are in complete cahoots with the government in terms of actually creating false narratives and false information at a time when we are trying to have an election here. And I was very upset, obviously, when they announced Biden, and I live in Boston, so I heard a lot of people out in the streets, whooping it up, and all this hatred pouring out, and a lot of four-letter words, and a lot of people running around, with blue hair and no masks, and just lots of tattoos, and this is my neighborhood, and it was very depressing. I mean, it was to hear this, but I am starting to feel better. I think that I knew President Trump would step up to the plate. He is stepping up, and I do think that he's going to save the day, really, for all of us, liberal and conservative, because I don't think anybody wants to have an election stolen. And I think that once the word gets out that's what's going on, and once the cat's out of the bag, I think people are going to turn on this, and they're going to accept Trump, even if they don't like him, because nobody wants to see this country go down that road.
Nobody wants to become a banana republic.
Yeah,
That's
basically.
essentially what it is. And I think the censorship on the left is absolutely terrible. And I think it's a sign that their ideas are really poor. In my study of socialism, because I really studied it well for the book I wrote this past year, and that one of the things I found was that the left, the socialists and the communists cannot tolerate the truth. They cannot tolerate anyone disagreeing with them because that's like a crack in their armor. They have the control, and they can't have any cracks getting in there because they might lose total control. So they shut down all free speech. And this is a characteristic not of just here, but in other socialist dictatorships and countries that went socialist. That's one of the things they do. They shut down free speech.
Well, they cannot. They have to control the means of communication. They can't argue their positions using reason and conventional notions of logic. So they have to like squelch any opposition. It's all about power. They want to seize power, use human beings as guinea pigs in their social experiment. I mean, it's it's interesting that at a time like this, we are seeing the true colors. I think if we pay attention, we're seeing people like the Squad and them say that there's going to be an enemies list. They're going to go after people who haven't genuflected to their point of view. We see them communicating with foreign leaders now. Which, by the way, is what they charged Lieutenant General Michael Flynn with
Right.
doing. Right now, they're all doing it. We see that they're talking about their agenda, and they're coming out with it fairly openly. I mean, even to the most ridiculous assertion by Biden's so-called head of the COVID-19 committee, that if there is a vaccine, then foreigners are going to get it first. It's going to be sent to other countries and not the United States. I mean, and the Boston Globe is here in my own hometown, openly and unabashedly writing articles, gleefully declaring that the idea of America first is now dead. And I think we need to remember that. We need to.
Election's not over.
No, it's not. And when the day of reckoning comes, and I think it's moving up there every hour, then we're going to find out what they meant by these things. We should keep a record of it. We should. You and I should write another book on this. In fact, I'm already thinking of starting it now. To just see what we can learn before it all gets swept under the rug, in terms of exactly what these people have in mind. And
Yeah.
they know what's at stake. First of all, a lot of them, if Trump does win, you're going to have a lot of them go to jail. I mean, people like Comey and Brennan and all these conspirators. Once Trump is in for the second term, they're going to be finished. And if he loses, they're going to be scot-free. We'll never get to the bottom of that.
Oh yeah, all the investigations would cease. They wouldn't allow it.
Oh, yeah, that'll be all over. But if he wins, they're going to be personally in trouble. And more broadly, we're going to have a major sweep of all of these conspirators who have been embedded into the Trump administration by the previous administration. And so there's a lot of people who have a personal interest in trying to do Trump in. And I think that's going to come out if and when, God willing, he is confirmed as the winner.
And I think another repercussion if Trump does win, which I think he will, is the impact on the social media giants on Silicon
Oh,
Valley.
yeah.
You know, just think, suppose you're a citizen and you went to Verizon to get a new cell phone, and they said to you, Charles, are you a conservative or are you with us, a socialist? And you said, no, I'm a conservative. They, okay, no phone service for you. Suppose our utilities, our electric company, our phone company, those are utilities, actually put a political test on whether or not they'd serve you. That's what this Facebooks and Twitters are doing. They're saying, oh, you're conservative, you can't use our media. And that is a utility.
It
A
is.
billion people have Facebook and use it as a utility.
We can't function without it now. I mean, it's like it's the equivalent of a telephone.
Yeah.
And and if they are successful in this coup d'état, that's going to be curtains for conservatives online. I mean, we're going to have to. I mean, people might not like Alex Jones, but he's been completely wiped off the face of the earth in terms of online. But he did set up his own app and he's functioning, but most people don't even have the resources to do that. They're just going to be gone. Probably people like me. There'll be no more platform. They'll let in sort of stooge Republicans every
Yeah.
so often. They'll put Mitt Romney in, to say, oh, here's the conservative view.
Token.
And it's going to be, and not real. And I mean, that's the hallmark of a fascist state.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And this is what we're looking at right now. We're looking right down the barrel of the fascist gun. This is very, very critical time. We really have to take stock of it. I mean, we need people. There's going to be a big, Stop the Steal rally in Washington, I think this weekend. I might even go down there myself. I mean, it's very important that we get involved right now. And to do so respectfully. I mean, you notice that on the night that the media decided to install Biden, there was no protests. There was no, the protests, if anything, were on the other side. But if it had been Trump, you were going to see, these communists come out and burn down black neighborhoods, loot black businesses, and kill black people, which is what they did last summer. And I think that's probably what's going to happen anyways once Trump wins.
Yeah.
We have to understand that. We have to stand up to it. We have to identify it for what it is and really do what we can to reduce it. But that's what we're looking at in this country. It's a scissors effect. You have the lower blade are the street agitators. The upper blade is the top 1% richest people in the world.
Yeah. That brings up another point. The Secretary of Defense was fired by Trump.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The significance of that, I believe, is this election. Why? Okay, I think what's going to happen is Trump is going to ultimately win in the Electoral College in December. And I think what's going to happen is those Antifas and BLM are going to go crazy in the cities and rioting. And I think Trump intends to use the Insurrection Act because it's such a global thing. It's all across the country. It's like a conspiracy to cause the rioting in that. And I think Espy did not want to use any military resources to protect the country internally, because he said that once publicly.
He did.
He sort of contradicted Trump when Trump said, I can handle these problems, and he contradicted him. I think that's the reason he was fired. I think Trump is getting ready for what's expected in December.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And, this is what's going to happen, most likely. And he didn't follow orders when it did happen, costing lives, costing property, when the situation could have been quelled appropriately and carefully. He doesn't have the backbone to do it. I don't know why, but yeah, that's pretty clear that he was not the right man to be, heading that department. Also,
really, he was a
lobbyist. He's a hack, and also Giuliani. I'm not Giuliani, but Um, the when Bill Barr stepped up finally, and I don't totally trust him either, but he's at least now saying he's going to invest, calling for district attorneys to investigate. His right-hand man suddenly resigned, and we now know that that was another one of these Obama plants. Who, Obama like filled, on his way out the door, he basically put all these people into bureaucratic positions
On
to
purpose.
to operate as sleeper cells and to try to create problems and to whistleblow and to leak. I mean, the perfect example of that is this Admiral Vindman and
Yeah.
his brother, right? Put in there by Obama. Then he comes in and he starts to testify against Trump during this phony hearing and basically knew nothing about anything other than that he didn't think Trump had good foreign policy. Well, fine. He should have resigned and wrote a book, if he didn't like it. I mean, it was completely insubordinate.
There was no case.
No.
There was no case there.
No, well, there was a case. Actually, we now find out it was against Biden, not Trump.
Oh, well, yeah, that's different.
I mean, it was a classic case of projection. Anyways, so Gerard, you've written a very good book here, and I urge people to check it out. Real World Socialism. And it gets to the root cause of the exact issues that we're dealing with today. And you've got a good book out here, More Great News for America, where you talk about voter fraud evidence. Check that out. Gerard, where can people get your books?
Oh, most people get them from Amazon, but they're available in any bookstore, Barnes & Noble, online, and others. They show up the darndest places. Like there's an India website that sells the books. I don't know why.
Oh, that's great.
I
Well,
don't do shows in India. But
yeah, you connect with. I can see that. India knows something about socialism.
yeah,
Right.
but I just got a royalty check from Australia, so they sell all over the place,
That's
most of the
amazing.
U.S. But it's nice, and they can also go to my website to learn more about my books and my writing, because I do roughly an article a week. GreatNewsForAmerica.com, all spelled out.
Mm-hmm.
GreatNewsForAmerica.com was the name of one of my books, and it's also my website. It was easy to remember. People had a hard time spelling my last name.
Mm-hmm.
I had to get a website that they could find easily. Great News for America, everybody can spell.
Oh, excellent. And I'll check it out. Maybe, I'd like you to come on regularly. I mean, this is
Sure.
very, very, very topical and very important information. All right. So, Gerard, listen, I want to thank you for joining me as always.
Yes.
And God willing, we'll talk at more propitious events.
I think we're going to have happier days ahead.
Me too.
When
All
the
right. But
electricity-
let's stay vigilant.
Yes.
All right. Thanks
Take
so much,
care.
sir.